What they were using there on the highway development, you know, they had some rock for this.
Yeah, areas, is that currently under the urban merge?
Sisters, I don't wanna.
No, the county parcel.
Oh,
that-
I do believe it is, yeah.
Yeah.
You've got, and you've got.
Evil.
If it's not, it's right.
I mean, a lot.
We've got a, no,
Yeah, so we don't know.
yeah.
They might be able to apply.
Yeah. James and Carol's got a
Yeah.
warrants this morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Good, and
I don't know if that's. I mean, it's for 480 pairs. But that would take it serious. You really need somebody. Horseback riding. And actually.
That's where I thought we were going, but it's a good thing he drove.
you have
Picked up, but it's chained up. Looks like it's serious. No, that's fair, that's all right. A little while.
All right, well, good morning. I think it looks like we have form, so we're gonna step into it. So thank you all for making it here today, and thanks to the members of the public joining up and to look forward to hearing it from you when you get to that part of the agenda. So before we jump in, my name is Tim Brownell. I'm the director of the solid waste department here for Deschutes County. And the folks at the table are members of the SWAC committee, Solid Waste Advisory Committee. We had Ryan Rudnick with the Parametrics, which is the consulting firm that is assisting the county in assessment of potential landfill sites and leading us through the process. And then we have some other staff members online. So I'm going to do roll call to make sure we have a quorum. Neil Bonsgard, the Environmental Center. He's not here. In his place is Lindsay Hardy. She's not a non-voting member, but is participating. Brent Bybee, City of Alpine, are you online? Jackson Dumanche, City of Sisters.
Here.
Morning, Jackson. Luke Dines, citizen at large. John Nelson, City of Redmond. I'm John. Keith Casares, citizen at large.
Here.
Morning, Keith.
Morning, Tim.
Cassie Lacey, City of Bend.
Here.
Erica Heitzma, with Public Services. Tim Shimkey, citizen at large. Here. Erwin Swetnam, Cascade Disposal. President, and Robin Bora, citizen at large.
Hi, I'm here. I'm in the library in Minnesota. There's some kids playing music in the background. Are you picking that up?
No. No.
Okay, but you can hear me okay?
Yeah, just fine. Morning, Robin.
Morning.
All right, so we have a quorum. With that, we'd like to, review and approve the minutes. Is there a motion to approve? From the June minutes?
I'll move to approve June minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. John Nelson moved and Tim Shimkey seconded. Any discussions, modifications, edits? Hearing none. Vote to approve, say aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Okay, minutes pass. All right, let's pick up. Hey, this is just, we have in our packet the list of SWAC members, so anybody interested. Welcome to peruse through that. So first, we wanted to start with an update on the sites that we are currently considering. On the Horse Ridge site, that's the site off of Horse Ridge Frontage Road at the base of it. Horse Ridge Mountain, just to the south of Highway 20 before you go over Horse Ridge Pass. We had met with the owners of the Horse Ridge Pit LLC, had a second meeting with them yesterday. And what we've been doing with our meetings is to affirm whether they have a continued interest in potentially selling and or transferring their properties to the county under this process. And the owners of Horse Ridge Pit reiterated yesterday that they continue to be interested. They are going to start to put together a price offer for the county to consider. We've also met with Hap Taylor and Sons pit owner, which is Knife River Corporation. That was in April. They expressed a interest to sell that property. They do not use that for any significant mining activities at this point. It's more of a disposal site for the scrapyard for concrete and that sort of thing. So it is not an active property for them, and they are interested in selling it to the county. And then the last piece that we were waiting to have discussions with was ODOT, which owns a 20-acre parcel of that, but it's kind of a critical 20-acre parcel. They, as of last week, had expressed a desire to transfer that property as well through a sale or some sort of transaction. Within that would also most likely require the county to take on the responsibility of Horse Ridge Frontage Road. So that's roughly a 5.5 mile currently oil mat access road, frontage road. If we are hauling large trailers across that site, again, it's the landfills we're looking at is limited access, meaning it's not a public facility that the general public would be going to. It would just be transfer trailers coming out of our transfer sites and other specific designated loads so directed because of the size and weight. That road is not currently designed for heavy transfer loads, so that they would expect and or we expect that in any sort of transaction, they would want the county to take on the responsibility of upgrading and maintaining that piece of road. But the good news being that all three of the property owners have expressed interest and willingness to move forward with the county. Discussions around purchase. Dodds Road site, that is a COLD owned parcel. Initial discussions with them had talked about whether there would be an opportunity to purchase or long-term lease with option to purchase that property. That's, I don't know the exact size of that parcel, but I think that the landfill suitable area is just around 200 acres, 215 acres. So it's where the Horse Ridge site is well over 100-year capacity. The Dodge Road site is probably closer to 85 years, unless we were to procure additional land outside of that property from BLM or what have you. Last month we had public comments here. And then there was a meeting last week with the COID board. This was not on the agenda, but we understand that there was significant community input at that board meeting. Their board is expected to agendize and discuss whether they want to move forward or ask the county to no longer consider that site. So that's where we're at relative to COID and expecting a call from them for the early August, after August 10th. And then the Roth site, or site, we're looking at potentially 2 locations on their property. They continue to be eager to offer their property to the county. They've provided a revised price. It's our intention to, at some point over the next few months, start discussions with them as to what that structure and cost of that property would be. It's still a property under consideration until told otherwise. So, the Moon Pit site, which is not on this list, that was the site originally recommended by the SWAC. It's not officially off the list. We would consider approaching them again as well to make sure that they are no longer interested, or if they are interested, if they would consider discussing terms. So it's not officially removed, but we were at impasse in our discussions with them. So with that, we've also done a bit of outreach, public outreach to different interested stakeholders. We've done outreach to Confederated Tribe of Warm Springs. They did reply indicating receipt of our communication, that they will continue to monitor and make comments as they deem necessary to go through this process. We've reached out to the recreation groups, Central Oregon Trail Alliance, regarding the mountain bike and hiking trails, particularly near the Horse Ridge site, just that they're aware that that site is under consideration. There are access trails on either side of that property within about half a mile that head up to Horse Ridge. So we do expect that we'll hear comments from them. The Regional Solutions Team, which is it's a bunch of state and federal organizations and departments interested in the environmental issues related to their jurisdiction. So we've informed them of where we're at in the process, the reconvening process, and certainly expect comments from them as we move forward. And then we've reached out to a slew of the environmental advocacy organizations from Central Oregon Land Watch, ONDA, the Oregon Natural Desert Association, the Environmental Center, to meet with their conservation network to keep them apprised of the efforts that this group is making, and where the county's at, to solicit feedback. And then we have also received a number of public comments, both comments that were distributed here at last meeting, as well as emails and other correspondences. All of those comments are made available to the SWAC members, our Board of County Commissioners, and they are on our website for anybody interested in reviewing those. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ryan. He's going to give you an update of where we're at on the site screening process and any additional information we've been able to bring forward over the last month.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So in the last meeting, there were a number of points identified for further study, questions that SWAC members had, even questions we heard from the public that we wanted to provide additional information on. So I'll go through those now. One question was, why not just haul the waste to the gorge? Let's take a look at that. The comparison between long haul and siting an in-county landfill. In 2019, and this was extensively studied through the solid waste management plan, and more recently through a 2024 landfill alternatives analysis, which J.R. Miller and Associates provided to the Board of County Commissioners earlier this year in March. And at the time of the solid waste management plan, it was determined for a number of reasons that siting the county and the landfill would be the most environmentally and economically responsible option for the county and its constituents. Over the life cycle, municipal solid waste export costs are estimated to be 2 to 3 times more expensive than with a local landfill over the lifespan. And again, if you want more information on that, please see the JRMA report from that March 19th meeting. It also explores alternative technologies, such as waste to energy incinerators and other options for municipal solid waste disposal. Looking at the costs and the feasibility of those alternative systems. Additionally, hauling waste to the gorge exposes the county to more risk, ties the county to long-term private contracts with future cost uncertainty. Additionally, disruptions due to hail, ice, and other adverse weather events could lead to disruptions in solid waste operations and safety concerns. Also, the 100+ mile hauls mean more trucks and more greenhouse gases for as long as diesel is being burned to run them. And so there's a concern there and environmental impact associated with hauling waste to the gorge. In March, ultimately, this is a board decision whether it'll be sited in the county or exported outside of the county. And past decisions from the board affirm the decision to site it in the county. And more recently in March, the board was presented with the option of handing this whole process and just shipping out to the gorge. And they reiterated the importance of siting an in-county landfill for the long-term benefit to its constituents. Even though there's short-term pain in the siting process. So I got 2 going on here. So another question was, what are some of the site-specific risks and challenges for each site? That is, so with the Horse Ridge site, this would require 3 separate property acquisitions. So that increases the complexity of and legal and negotiation complexity of acquiring those sites. It's adjacent to the Horse Ridge trails and somewhat nearby to the Badlands Wilderness area. So the site could potentially be more visible due to visitation to the area. It's generally a fairly well concealed site. It's kind of in a natural depression and hidden from juniper screening and whatnot, ridge lines. But just activity around the area, mountain biking, and then visitation to the southern edge of the Badlands area, give people an opportunity to notice it. SM zoning requires a legislative text amendment to allow for landfilling as a reclamation activity on surface mine sites. And this is zone surface mine.
And just to to add, those who don't know, SM zoning is surface mine, so.
Site also has no existing water rights associated with the site. Although there are 2 exempt use wells on site, and one of the property owners does hold nearby water rights, although their status doesn't appear to be developed or transferring. So those are the risks associated with the Horse Ridge site. With the Dodge Road site, the major risk there is the proximity to homes. There's roughly 60 dwellings within 2 miles, 18 within 1 mile, 3 within a half mile. Of all the sites, this one has the highest residential proximity. With many of these site neighbors being CYD patrons, that could complicate CYD's willingness itself, as Tim was discussing earlier. Excavation and topography, this site could require a 150 to 200 feet of fill with that 200 acre footprint in order to provide 100-year capacity or even 80-year capacity around 150. So that significant prominence and visibility can attract negative attention, opposition, birds, and could complicate litter control as those elevated portions of the landfill would be deal with higher winds up there. Height limitations could also be imposed as a condition of approval due to the prominence, which would cut down on the lifespan. There's shallow basalt bedrock, as far as we can tell. A geotechnical study hasn't been done on the site, but the exposure of basalt rock ridges and protrusions, and just knowledge of the soil area or the basalt flows there, with silty sand over the top, and well logs also are the data points to suggest that the shallow bedrock. So the excavation to volume ratio would be pretty poor there. Meaning it's not a very efficient site in terms of capacity. Excavation would be challenging, and there's limited soil available from what we can tell on site for daily cover and for liner materials. It's zone EFU alfalfa, which is mapped as farmland of statewide significance if it was irrigated or if there were water rights associated with it historically. It may be classified as high value farmland, which would impact the land use approval, complicate that process. That's been looked at. We haven't seen any information thus far that it has had a water right associated with it. But we've contacted CYD and they're exploring that further. There's also no water rights or existing wells on site, so that would increase the reliance on interim water trucking water supply until water rights can be secured at the site. So, handful of risks and challenges associated with this one. For Rock East and Rock Northeast, those 2 sites, they're within low density sage grouse habitat and within a half a mile of a core area. So this would trigger state and county sage grouse mitigation requirements. We'll have more on that in the slides to follow. Opposing testimony, delays, and appeals from members of the public and organizations such as Central Oregon Land Watch, ONDA, Environmental Center, Pine Mountain Observatory, and others could delay land use approvals and the solid waste permit issuance. There's no water rights associated with this site. And there is one existing well, but its usefulness for the site is uncertain. Depends on the distance away and whatnot. Timeline and likelihood of securing and mitigating a new groundwater right is very uncertain out there. So that's a challenge with that site. And we'll have more on interim kind of water supply strategies in the upcoming slides. Now this one is zoned EFU, the Horse Ridge subzone. There's still a legislative text amendment needed to change the timing restriction for a landfill site, which conditionally allows siting of a disposal site if the permit was granted before 1992. And so there's this weird timing issue that would need to be resolved for this site. So really any of these sites have required a legislative text amendment for one or more reasons or another. Additionally, the farm impact test could be challenging with this site, similar to the COID site. Just demonstrating that it isn't productive farmland that could be used for another agricultural purpose. Next up, Moon Pit site, again, just keeping this kind of in the batch for comparison. Acknowledging that it could be an option if directed by the SWAC. And it was pretty good to sell, but for comparison, the risks associated with this site, there is that there would be disagreements over the acquisition timeline, property appraisal, and water rights valuation. That risk turned to be an issue with the negotiation process. The change of use of the access road requires NEPA compliance with DLM. And that is a very lengthy process. We assume that would include or involve an environmental impact statement for the most efficient approach to NEPA. And that could subject the project to lengthy review periods and indefinite appeal. It's also adjacent to the Badlands Wilderness area and the public trailhead. And again, that visibility can draw public concern over the potential impacts to the recreational experience. Unanticipated poor rock material and qualities and or market values could diminish the extent to which aggregate mining can subsidize cell development costs. We made an educated assumption as far as how much of that rock could be marketable and what the rock could be essentially sold for after being excavated for the landfill. In order to generate cost estimates, it could be different from that depending on market conditions and the rock quality. And so that could change the economics of the Moon Pit site and operating it as both a quarry and a landfill. It's an SM zone site, so that would require a legislative text amendment for landfilling as a reclamation activity. So the idea is if the site has been exhausted of all its aggregate resources, then one way to close it up or reclaim the site from its disturbance is to landfill it. And this would be a prerequisite for the conditional use permit application. So just one step that needs to check out before submitting the conditional use permit application. There were also questions on how water supply would be developed at each of these sites. We were asked by a SWAC member to dig a little deeper into what's there and how it might work to get water at each of these sites for the landfill operations. So let's go through here. With Horse Ridge, the depth of groundwater is 850 to 950 feet. There's 2 wells mapped off-site within 1 mile, and those are for residences that are to the northwest. And on site, there are 2 existing wells. So that gives a sense of kind of the hydrogeology, the number of wells around it, and the ones on site that would be used for the landfill. A tentative water supply strategy would be there's 2 existing exempt wells that can provide baseline water demands. And there's potential development of additional exempt wells on each tax lot. So the one that doesn't have a well, an exempt well could be developed there for the purposes of dust suppression within its boundaries. They can be interconnected and whatnot, but within each of those tax lots, those can be made available for dust suppression in their boundaries. And then the county can truck supplemental water in until water rights are secured to provide adequate water on site. For Roth East and Roth Northeast, groundwater is not quite as deep. It's 460 to 630 feet. There's 5 offsite wells mapped within 1 mile of the disposal site area. 1 to 2 existing wells on site if you count the deep well and the Bradovic well. One's on Roth East, one's on Roth West. Tentative water supply strategy would be to utilize the 1 to 2 existing exempt wells on site for baseline water demands. Although their location would need to be the same as the use area, so there might be limitations with that. There's potential development of additional exempt wells on each tax lot, so that's the opportunity there. if lot lines were configured to align with cell development or area development, for example, then water could be made available in those areas for dust suppression. And then again, calling in supplemental water until water rights are secured. Dodds Road, depth of groundwater is roughly 621 to 713 feet deep, based on nearby well logs. There's 11 offsite wells mapped within 1 mile, a 1 mile buffer of the site. On site, there's no existing wells. So the water supply strategy, in this case, there's one tax lot. And so without subdivision, there's opportunity to establish one exempt well on site for baseline water demands and then hauling in relatively more supplemental water until water rights are secured. And Moon Pit, you probably heard about this before. We studied this much further in the final site evaluation. But the depth of groundwater is 850 feet. There's 2 existing wells on site. At least one has a water right, a more than adequate water right associated with it, over a cubic feet per second for the maximum rate. And so, yeah, the strategy there would be to utilize the existing on-site industrial well and transfer a portion of the Hooker Creek existing water right for the county. That's a brief overview of that. How much water would the new landfill require? The water usage is expected to be less than 5,000 gallons a day in the winter months, which is November to February. That's based on not landfill water usage here. And up to 50,000 gallons per day in the heat of summer, when dust suppression needs peak. And just to kind of put this to scale, exempt domestic wells are authorized to withdraw up to 5,000 gallons per day. So comparable to maybe what one home can use in the winter time and what 10 homes could use in the winter time. So it's comparable to a small subdivision, say 10 homes, and what their water usage could be if they each have exempt wells. So yes, it's more than what a home uses, but it's not. But yeah, you can determine if that seems like a lot or not, but 1 to 10 homes. Or perhaps the anticipated landfill water usage is comparable to that of 6 to 10 domestic wells. And this was based on the not landfill water usage based on Avion water records from landfill here. For use at the landfill, primarily for dust suppression. Some for fire suppression.
That's just us.
Just dark. And so the new landfill would likely have lower water use than what not has now, but eventually could get up to this level and these patterns of water use. Once there's more disturbed area, thus keep down. And so another question was, how are you gonna how are you gonna deal with the rock on site? And how do the sites compare in terms of the prevalence of rock? And so we created this high level preliminary kind of sliding scale or spectrum per se of the blast frequency and rock occurrence being low on the left, and then lots of rock and lots of blasting on the right, to put it simply. And so based on the geotechnical information that we have for these sites, which is variable, Rockies has a lot of geotechnical data gathered on it. Horse Ridge, to some degree, and Moon Pit Dodds has the least, but based on what we can see again from rock exposures and well, that appears to be the site with the most rock and also the least. There's no excavated area, whereas with Moon Pit, there's comparable soils. Perhaps it does have an alluvial deposit at the low end, where it's easier to dig without blasting. But other than that, it's shallow bedrock, shallow basalt. But there's already excavated area for Moon Pit that can be used for solid waste disposal. Not the case of Dodds. And so more rock, more blasting at Dodds. Second to that would be Moon Pit. For the reasons I just mentioned. And then at Horse Ridge, there is a 30 to 50 foot deep band of alluvial deposits at the low, kind of the low part of the ridge, kind of between two valleys, so it's a drainage where sand has collected, sand and gravel has collected over the years. And then there's basalt ridges on either side. And so, and some of that area has already been excavated, so this is likely to have some blasting to shape some of those ridges, to excavate some of the areas where there's basalt. It is undulating, it's not a perfect face to fill against, and so some blasting and some rock, and some rock's good, because rock is a useful material for drainage, for roads, that doesn't part of the landfill, and other uses. And there may be a road to maintain too as part of the Horse Ridge site, so there could be some of that. But then rock east, there are larger cobbles, about 12 inches and smaller roughly. And but there isn't solid, hard basalt for 300 feet or so, so no blasting is anticipated at rock east. So it's kind of interesting how the sites we have here are very variable, kind of along the spectrum. So hopefully that helps kind of give a sense of the extent of rock and blasting required for each site. It's worth noting that blasting is not expected to be a daily occurrence at any of these landfill sites. For example, at not landfill here, rock excavation typically requires up to 4 days of blasting per cell construction, which occurs every 3 years on average. And so it's not a daily thing to contend with. There are times when it happens, I believe notification goes out, right? For those specific days when that would occur.
Where on the spectrum then would you put not? To kind of drop it somewhere on that line.
Good question.
Yeah, I think that would probably go right in the middle. But not has about 30 feet, 30 to 40 feet of basalt on the top, like icing, and then, another 60 feet, up to 60 feet of dirt that we excavate underneath that. So, yeah, we'd have to do initial blasting, and then excavation. So, yeah, I think it's right in the middle.
Good question. Another question we got is how will you get the material you need for daily and intermediate cover at each of these sites? So throughout the east, there's abundant on-site soils suitable for cover material. Screening would be done to separate oversized materials such as those big boulders I was talking about. Rock crushing would also be needed to break those rounded cobbles down into angular rock or to the proper gradation. For Horse Ridge, on-site exposures indicate 20+ feet of alluvial deposits within the valley. You can see that here on the right. This is taken at Horse Ridge, and this isn't all the way down as far as we can tell. So native ground is roughly up there where the tanks were installed, and then cut was done down to this point, and then there's more depth beyond that. But that just shows at least what's there in that region. Shallow bedrock within sloped areas, right? So those kind of ridges that head down to the northward. Shallow bedrock. The alluvial deposits would be screened and processed for cover, cushion, and drainage materials. You can see a sampling of those here. I think these were taken at the Horse Ridge Pit LLC, and some of those have been processed. So that's processed rock. This is just native, unprocessed, as it is on the ground at the ODOT site. Yeah, shallow rock will be drilled, blasted, and crushed for drainage layer and road base. So a mix of materials there, rock and gravel and sand at Horse Ridge. Moon Pit, there's a thin veneer of silty sand alluvial deposits over shallow rock. Rock will be drilled, blasted, and crushed for excavation. So besides what's available in the alluvial deposits for cover, yeah, the overburden materials and crushed rock will be used for daily and intermediate cover. At Dodds Road, there's thin and limited silty sand overburden with rock outcrops. At the surface, the rock will be drilled, blasted, and crushed for soil cover beyond what could be used from the overburden, which is we assume to be no more than 10 feet deep on average. With potential need for importing supplemental soil cover material. So there's another question about landfill height and zoning. As we're considering landfill capacity estimates, it's a function of how high you can go also. So we did meet with CDD, the Community Development Department, the county, and discuss some of the different criteria related to height that may be applicable to landfills in various zones. So in the EFU zone, there's a 30-foot structure height limit, but that is measured from finished grade, which is understood to be the landfill final cover elevation. And so in that sense, or for that reason, the 30-foot structure limit does not constrain the landfill height specifically. Now you can't put a 35-foot building on top of the landfill. That would be, for example. But in the LM zone, the 30-foot height limit is measured from the average natural grade. And so that would constrain the landfill height. This,
Want to explain what LM zone is?
oh yes, landscape management zone. Typically see those as bands along highways to maintain the landscape around corridors, as well as other places such as, I think, along rivers. This landscape management zoning is pretty common. And so, yeah, this would limit the landfill height because of that measurement. And so, again, this would come into play for the sites along the highway, such as Rock Northeast, where a portion of that site is within the landscape management zone. Although there's no explicit height limitation in state and federal code, the ultimate site-specific landfill peak elevation will be influenced by the footprint's shape, slope stability, drainage, visual blending, and potentially local permit conditions of approval. Like a conditional use permit was approved, but it can only be 50 feet high, for example. That would constrain the height. So those are our findings regarding landfill height and zoning. FAA guidance and airport proximity. The question was raised whether the proper method is being used to measure the distance between airports and landfill sites, and the effect that it's had on excluding some sites that are closer to town, further from wildlife habitat, but closer to into town. Because that 5-mile buffer cuts out a lot of potential sites. And it is a recommendation, not a requirement, but let's go through this. So in FAA Advisory Circular 150/5200-33, several of these, so this is the most applicable one. It establishes a recommended 5-mile buffer between landfills and airports to mitigate bird strike rate. Now, there's two sections that come into play here. In section 1.4, that's about general wildlife attractions, such as wastewater ponds or golf courses or landfills. Could be one of those. And the method presented there is measurement from the aircraft operations area to the wildlife attractant. And that's not specifically controlling or applicable to landfill siting. That's general wildlife attractants. But section 2.2.2 is specific to landfills, and that describes the method of measurement being from property boundary to property boundary. And I think the difference there might have to do with how there could be litter within the property boundary and a wildlife attractant extending to the property boundary, as opposed to a point, like say a pond in a large BLM parcel that's huge. The measurement property boundary to property boundary wouldn't really get at the issue as much as wildlife attractant to aircraft operations area. So there's that specific method of measurement described by the FAA for landfill separation, being property boundary to property boundary. And that, in the case of both of these airports, is much further away from their runway. And they do have plans to expand out additional runways and operations area further from where their runways are now. And so, kind of drilling down how this affects the process. sites within that 5 mile buffer, such as Ricker Road site, Bear Creek, Negus, they were screened out for FAA recommendations and a decision by Board of County Commissioners and SWAC to not consider sites that go against that recommended 5 mile buffer. And that came out of the county's risk assessment, and when it was raised, if a bird strike accident were to occur, and a plane goes down from a bird strike, then, and the county went against these recommended buffers, that could expose the county to some serious risk. And so, for that reason, among others, county decided to interpret that recommendation as siting criteria. And sites within that being fatally flawed. And so, while a smaller acceptable landfill footprint, so let me back up, as part of this supplemental screening process, the county's been open to smaller sites, right, such as Horse Ridge, Rock Northeast, Dobbs Road, that may have 80 years of capacity, which means a smaller footprint. And so it's been suggested that, you know, with a smaller footprint, maybe you can fit a site in just outside of one of these buffers. And we've looked around at some of those and haven't seen that to be the case in particular. So no specific landfill sites appear to benefit from this minor change of capacity criteria. That makes sense. Also, reintroducing these sites or other sites with 5 mile buffer would contradict previous decisions and technical evaluations. So, next up, we have some preliminary habitat quantification tool updated results of the tool that ODFW uses to estimate mitigation requirements. Our biologist Colton Hero will speak to these slides. But it was requested in the last meeting that we take a look into what the mitigation requirements would be for each site. At least a preliminary glance to compare these different sites. Are you on, Colton?
Sue, you may need to bring him in.
Hey there, can everyone hear me?
There you go, you're on.
Fantastic. Yeah, so for all of these new supplemental sites, we assessed both the impacts to both sage grouse as well as to big game. So starting off with Horse Ridge, it is about a mile away from low density sage grouse habitat, and there would be no impacts to core areas. It is much farther out. In coordination with ODFW, they ran their habitat quantification tool and found that development of a landfill at Horse Ridge would impact about 19.1 functional acres of sage grouse habitat. And so this image to the right is generally showing the overall area that is considered sage grouse habitat. Now this includes low density and core area, which are a little bit further away from Horse Ridge, but the reason why that like a brown polygon extends all the way to Horse Ridge is because that's considering general habitat, which is measured from 3.1 miles away from any ongoing lek, which is where they breed. And so that's including all those areas. And so that's what ODFW is looking at to see what are the indirect and direct impacts of a landfill, indirect being both noise, sound, and then also corvid attractants that often go after chicks. And so also in coordination with ODFW, they have this in lieu fee where we would provides an estimate cost for how much it would cost to mitigate for those 19.1 functional acres. And that came to be about $100,000. I will note that this was in 2021 dollars, so it need to be adjusted. This accounts for the 100-year lifespan of the landfill itself. That's kind of their base rate for like a permanent impact. And that this value should be considered the maximum cost for a mitigation. There are other mitigation means such as permittee responsible. We acquire a piece of land. In addition to that, there are some upcoming mitigation banks that would be selling sage grouse credits that ODFW let us know that they are nearing to being able to sign off. And so those perhaps will be available for when this landfill gets constructed and permitted. And also want to note that this is within Category 2 elk and mule deer winter range habitat. This is a protected habitat with ODFW, and that there would be additional mitigation required for that. Ryan, next slide.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Is the in lieu fee, is that a one-time cost or is that an annual fee?
That is a one-time cost.
Okay.
Good question.
Bring up, right.
All right, Roth East. So again, this is really just relating previous information that we had in our previous reports, that it is within low density sage grouse habitat, and it is within, half a mile from a core area. Just want to note that, this is subject to Division 140 rules, which is more or less stating that before an applicant can develop within low density or core habitat, they need to consider other areas outside of sage grouse habitat and determine that there is no other feasible alternative, or that site development depends on site-specific physical features. This all to say that, the process of this SWAC is this alternative analysis, looking at sites both in and outside of sage grouse habitat, using a multitude of factors, so that if it is determined that there is no feasible site outside of sage grouse habitat, then we can proceed forward and develop within Rothies itself. However, since it is within it is within low density habitat, there is a fair amount of both direct and indirect impacts. And the analysis done by ODFW with the HQT found that it would impact about 199.3 functional acres. This was not rerun in 2025. And however, the in lieu fee estimate was about $7.6 million. Again, in 2021 dollars for the 100-year lifespan of this landfill. And furthermore, that this property is also within Category 2 elk and mule deer winter range habitat, in addition to pronghorn habitat, and there would be additional mitigation required with ODFW for those impacts. And also to note that both there was a Roth East and also the Roth Northeast, which is a little bit north of this, I guess, purple shaded polygon in the image right there. Again, similar to that image shown before of this, all of these polygons in brown are showing all of the habitat that would be indirectly impacted by the landfill itself. You can see it's much larger because it's within, the center of low density habitat, in addition to it impacting core habitat. And direct impacts would be that purple hashing itself. But that, going back to Roth Northeast, it'd be as where that cursor showing right there. And that in coordination with ONDA, that, they're providing some circuitscape mapping of where likely sage grouse do move on the landscape, and that showing that generally Roth East is generally right where it is modeled to show where sage grouse move. But that is all to say that within the parameters of the HQT, that it is not necessarily fine-tuned to measure migration pathways. So as far as from an ODFW standpoint, that moving it to the northeast would not necessarily reduce the burden of the HQT functional acre losses. That from how they calculate it, it would not functionally change it, but that perspective wise, it would reduce impacts, because it would be, placing it more further up north by the highway. But we would likely still be on the hook for a similar level of functional acres lost. Next slide, please. Dobbs Road, it is pretty far out from any low density and core area shown on the map to the right. Low density is in that light brown shading, as well as core areas in that dark brown shading. It is pretty far and out of any sage grouse habitat, so it would have no direct or indirect impacts, so there'd be no sage grouse mitigation required. There would be still impacts to Category 2 mule deer and elk winter range habitat, However, as you can see in the gray shading, it is outside of the wildlife area combining zone for Deschutes County. And so because it is not protected by these county layers, that there may not necessarily be any mitigation requirements with ODFW. And then furthermore, but due to the site limitations with Dobbs, that there would still be high visibility in residential proximity that may increase overall scrutiny of wildlife impact minimization. Next slide, please. And just also a revisit to Moon Pit, general for reference of that, it is, located, just outside of low density sage grouse habitat, but that no impacts to core area would be occurring. Again, the image to the right is both showing the brown line or the yellow circle is the buffer of impact, but then those smaller orange polygons are generally showing what habitats that are sage grouse habitat, both low density, what low density impacts would be impacted by Moon Pit. And that ODFW was able to update their HQT results for Moon Pit, and it got bumped down to 4.6 functional acres. It used to be 9 functional acres down in 2023. And from that bumping down, ODFW was not able to provide an in-lieu fee estimate for this, but we are estimating that it'd be between $150,000 and $270,000. We're still in communication with ODFW, and they'll let us know when that has been calculated. The previous in-lieu fee estimate for this site was about $500,000. And just as every other site, this is located in Category 2 habitat for, in this case, elk and mule deer winter range, in addition to pronghorn habitat. However, this site does have the benefit that it is already heavily disturbed with ongoing mining operations there, and that all of those ongoing mining operations area is not considered habitat. And so that overall reduces the mitigation burden in regards to when we're looking at big game habitat impacts. So the net result with this site was that it has among the lowest habitat mitigation burden of all sites to be evaluated to date. And this is largely owing to its location and then prior use as a service mine, which overall reduces its ecological impacts and thus the regulatory requirements.
I have another question.
Please.
Your estimates in 2021 dollars that are gonna be higher, and as well as the 100-year lifespan, can you give me a rough idea of how much those costs might go up? 50%, 20%?
From 2021 to 2025 dollars, or
Well, you're gonna come up to 2025, and then you're gonna make another adjustment because it's a 100-year site. And so I'm curious as to if it looked like one of them had a 7.6, Rockies had a $7.6 million cost estimate based on 2-year, 3-year-old data and not considering a 100-year site. I'm curious just how much higher this could go. And I know that's very, very difficult to pin down, but give me a ballpark if you can.
so with this in-lieu fee payment, we would just be paying when we are permitting the project, and then we would not be spending another dollar. So we would not be subject to the inflation of 100 years. But at this point, I cannot necessarily give you a sense of the inflation from 2021 to when we actually permit this, which would, 2026 so I cannot provide an estimate of the relative change in that value. But that is all to say that we would not be subject to 100 years of inflation costs, because we would just be paying at the timing of permitting.
Okay.
And in discussion with ODFW, they discussed potentially use of CPI, is that right, Colton? Over a couple of years to inflate from say 2021 to 2028.
Yeah.
I have a question about, so for moon pit, for the big game habitat, it says it's located in the category 2 habitat for elk, mule, deer, winter range and pronghorn habitat, but because it's an existing surface mine, the impacts are lower. But I'm curious why for Forest Ridge, it's located in the same range and it doesn't have that same kind of qualification about the fact that it's an existing surface mine that reduces the impacts. What's the difference between those sites? Is that just because Moon Pit, because they're both existing active mines? Is it just that Moon Pit is that much more active and intensive versus Forest Ridge, or would that also be true for Forest Ridge, that it's kind of in the habitat, but it is already a disturbed used site? So I've been trying to figure out like the real environmental impact of the Horse Ridge site, given that it's an active site.
That is a great point to bring up. And that is probably like more likely an omission on my part, that Horse Ridge's mitigation burden would be reduced with the ongoing aggregate mining that is occurring on there. The mention of Moon Pit is that the Moon Pit site is much more extensive, that it has much more extensive of mining operation and disturbance. Horse Ridge is disturbed. However, we would still, expect a decent mitigation burden on that site. We did not necessarily go through the steps of quantifying the amount of disturbed habitat on Horse Ridge compared to intact habitat and with the respective location of mine cells. However, you are correct in that its current ongoing disturbance would reduce the overall mitigation burden on that site.
Okay, thank you.
So question on the financial impact. So when exactly is the in lieu fee assessed, and then kind of when is that to be paid? Is that a single lump sum payment? Is that structured out over years? Like when does the county incur that burden?
Did you hear that question, Colton?
Yeah, the payment can be done in all in one lump sum. However, generally speaking, with mitigation payments, it is you pay for what you impact within a given year. So in the case of, some of these sites are, lower values, but if, Rothies don't necessarily want to put that much money into one single year of payment of that, it can be structured so that, when you expand with X mine cell and how many acres that would incur, then you would pay that given in lieu fee payment for that given area. And so you could do that incrementally as you are disturbing the landscape and thus removing habitat availability within there.
So let me ask a follow-up then. So if I'm understanding correctly, what you're saying is kind of as each cell is opened up, we would incur kind of a revised fee at that time, depending on the impact? Is that correct?
That is correct. It can be done, you can do it incrementally, or you can do it in a lump sum as well. It depends what is more.
Is that number set upon site selection, or is it set upon the time of the application? Because I'm thinking if we open up cell 1, we're going to incur X number of dollars, but that activity in cell 1 would theoretically impact the wildlife activity in cell 2. So would the impact be reassessed when we open up cell 2, or would it be assessed in total upon time of application?
That is.
I think I broke it.
I had to spend some time to think about that. That's a good question. Because these impacts, one, have indirect impacts, because this, how they quantify this is both from a direct impact of both direct habitat impact of what is being removed, as well as from an indirect. But then all this kind of is a function of the size of the landfill, and thus it's, indirect impacts. And so
I'm gonna, what's wrong with it? Sorry. A quick setup on my end.
Sorry. And so I think it would require further coordination with ODFW for what would be expected as far as the payments with in lieu fee as this landfill does develop and increase in size and thus increase its developed area.
And again, the in lieu fee estimates here are being presented to give a sense of habitat impact and the financial, like comparatively, the financial impact of that mitigation. But there's a lot of more, there are several more cost-effective approaches to mitigation that could be half that cost. As we discussed before, buying mitigation credits or doing committee responsible mitigation, dedicating land, conservation, et cetera. So this is just to kind of compare between the sites, but the specific numbers can vary, come down quite a bit with different approaches. In lieu fee is not the most cost-effective option. But it's
Ryan?
Mhm.
Robin has a question.
Oh, hey, I don't know. I had some clarification questions if we're into questions, but I don't know if Ryan, if you finished your presentation, if you want to do that first.
Yeah, we have a little more, I think. Or is that it?
So that's like.
Oh, that was it. Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay.
And then we'll have public comment.
Can I go ahead?
Yeah.
So actually the library moved me when you first started. I'm in a different room now. But so I missed the very first part about Horace Ridge. So do I understand correctly that all three owners are willing to work with the county on a landfill? Is that
Yes.
what you said? Okay.
Yes.
All right, that's good. And the Oregon Solutions Group, is that a government group or is that some kind of nonprofit or private organization group?
So it's coordinated, I believe, out of the governor's office to help different state agencies and other federal agency representatives all work together to.
Oh, okay. It's where there's conflict to try and come up with a solution. Okay.
Yeah, and to just kind of help government agencies function efficiently and talk
Okay.
with each other about what's going on.
And then legislative amendments, they all require that. Is that just a standard procedure? Or is that going to require a special session and somebody to introduce a bill and all that?
As we understand it, Robert, there are two different approaches within the county, and legislative, it means that it's done, there's a process, a countywide process that's done as opposed to just a board decision.
Oh, okay. But
Yeah.
it doesn't require the whole legislature to approve it. Okay, good. And then there was nothing new on Moon Pit, right? No further offers or counter offers or any negotiations
No,
results. Okay. And then the Horse Ridge visibility. I guess there's a road and there's a mountain bike trails. I guess what this is maybe unrelated, but the mountain bike trails that the BLM has on it, from my understanding, actually some of them go through a research natural area where they're not allowed. This sits right on top of Horse Ridge on the backside. You might want to look at that map. But it seems like if you really are going to focus on mountain bikes, that's going to affect sage grouse, any sage grouse use of that area if the mountain bike use increases, but maybe that's an aside. Um, and then the SM zoning at Horse Ridge, that's not a big problem. Did I understand that correctly?
Similar to Moon Pit, a legislative text amendment would be needed to authorize building its reclamation. Just a step in the
Okay.
process.
But the heights and so forth are not a big issue at Moon Pit or Horse Ridge or Dodds. Okay. Now the Pine Mountain Road, is that also, that's a recreation heavily used road going up to top of Pine Mountain. Is that within the LM zone or is it just Highway 20 as a strip?
Don't believe that Pine Mountain is in the landscape management zone, Pine Mountain Road, just the highway.
it's not the filter we've used, but we'll
Okay.
check on that, Robin.
Yeah, the Forest Service may have some kind of zoning associated with that Pine Mountain Road. And it sounds like water rights are problematic at all the sites except possibly Moon Pit. But they're not at this point something that's going to kill the deal, kind of we can still proceed ahead and figure that out. Is that correct in understanding that?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
To have access to water, it's, if we haul it, it would be an expense as opposed to, having an on-site water access.
okay. And on Roth East, the sage grouse Division 140, you mentioned ODFW, whatever that is. Um, does that result in a major problem that we really can't proceed as long as we have these other 2 or 3 sites?
I think that's a big point of discussion. Whether ample study was done and effort was taken to site the landfill outside of sage grouse zones. We believe this process shows thorough study and consideration of sites outside sage grouse areas, and it turns out to be infeasible to site the landfill at any of these alternate sites outside of sage grouse zones. That could serve as justification for selecting Roth East as the only remaining feasible option. Additionally,
Okay.
the availability of on-site soils could be presented as a site-specific resource needed for the land.
Okay. But that ODFW requirement is, so that's kind of a no-go unless all the other sites fail? I mean, is Roth East something we need to kind of, like Moon Pit, put aside if we cannot develop Horse Ridge or Dodge?
To preclude it.
It doesn't, you don't think it precludes it? I'm just
Um,
wondering, what you just said, it sounds like we have to first show that Horse Ridge and Dodge are not going to work, and Moon Pit, we cannot negotiate something before we can proceed with Roth East or the other Roth.
Holden, do you want to speak to this Division 140 requirement? I mean, generally, my understanding is you need to look at other options.
Yeah, that is
Us.
generally my understanding as well of that. I mean, we have gone through this entire site analysis through sites in and out, and that, we have looked at both Dobbs and Horse Ridge now, and that this is not saying that Roth East is entirely out of the going for site considerations, but that, we do need to, or that there are fully consider all other sites outside of it and have, I guess, in one sense, an iron-proof alternative analysis showing that, we did our complete due diligence, showing that we consider all other sites outside of sage grouse habitat, and that due to X, Y, and Z, whether it's due to Dobbs and it's basalt and that's not cost feasible, or due to other practical considerations, that this needed to be Roth East. And so
Okay.
not a nail in the coffin for Roth East, but that it is, we just need to have this, very thorough alternative analysis proving and showing that there are no other feasible alternative outside sage grouse.
Okay, so would that also apply then to trucking it to the Columbia River Gorge? Because if economics is not part of that, then that could be a feasible alternative.
Economics is part of it.
Okay. I was just wondering if that could be used as an argument against Roth East by itself. Alrighty, and the only other one I had is Rickard Road, just to clarify from what you said, does not have enough land left that would be for it to continue as a reduced, but site with an 80-year capacity or something. Given the airport guideline.
Yeah, Rickard Road, would not have enough, land outside of the 5 mile radius.
Oh, okay, because I thought originally from the last session that it actually did, but just not a large amount, but it did.
No, I think because of the property component to it, I think that moves it out entirely.
Okay,
Additionally, the exempt well buffers further constrain the available area.
okay. And, I guess, and maybe one more thing just to clarify, that for what I heard, the rock blasting and the soil to cover it's problematic at Dodds, but it's not at a stage that you couldn't go forward with any of the sites. Would that be correct? It's not a no-go at any one site.
There's a cost associated with that.
Yeah,
And neighboring impacts, I suppose.
right. Yeah, at Dodds, but it's not sufficient to the point that you just couldn't proceed with that one site. Okay.
I think you're asking, is it a fatal flaw that there?
Yeah, right.
That rock would be prevalent at Dodds and there'd be a lot of more blasting required than at other sites. And that there could be challenges generating soil cover. You're asking, those constitute a fatal flaw?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if that's a fatal flaw for Dodds.
We don't know at this point. It could be. It may be completely impractical to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So blast and crush to make adequate.
Okay.
And that's a good or distinction. But that would be considered a practical flaw, not a fatal flaw for the criteria. Because per the criteria, that is not laid out as a fatal flaw for siting, but that could be found to be a practical flaw site and its operation.
All righty. Well, thank you for answering all my questions.
Yeah. Thanks, Robert.
Keith, go ahead. Keith, you're up. There you go.
Yes. So based on what we've heard so far, the presentations from Ryan and Colton, I'm just thinking of listening to all the due diligence that's been done on these properties as well. At this point, either Ryan or Colton, what do you feel is the shortest path to success of each of these? Because it seems like whether it's sage grouse, whether it's a NEPA study like on Moon Pit, et cetera, there's some pretty lengthy delays it would take to get to a point where there's a definitive decision on what's the best property based on all the different factors that come into play. So I was just curious if you guys have looked at, estimated timelines to get through the hoops that need to be jumped through on each site.
So for site selection or for
permitting?
permitting?
For permitting, I'm just thinking if we cite one, that's great, but then thinking about some of these permitting delays could be up to 3 to 4 years on some of these sites. So I'm just curious if you've done that research yet to find out what's the quickest path to success for one of these site locations.
Yeah, we haven't studied all of these sites the same level as Rock East and Moon Pit with the final site evaluation where we dive more deeply into the permitting process and framework. But from what we've gathered with these alternate sites, it appears with every one of these sites, there's this text amendment for either the EFT or the SM zone. So that's one step in the process, then a conditional use permit, and then the solid waste permit. What's a key difference with in timeline, pretty significant difference is NEPA and having a BLM nexus, which Moon Pit had, and that introduces significant risk of delay to the project. So sites not having that would, there's a big benefit there. And so that's pretty much all the remaining sites. They don't have that same BLM nexus. Sites with.
I was gonna say, so in addition to that, so water rights sound like it's an issue at each of the sites, as Robin just mentioned too. Is one site quicker than the other in regards to water right access from the property owners that are there and deeding that over? I'm just curious, or like between Horse Ridge and Roth East or Roth Northeast, because each of those would require, I know there's some options to haul water in on a daily basis, but to actually secure water rights is usually pretty advantageous for the long run. And just curious if there's a timeline difference between those sites for water right access.
Dwight, you look like you have a comment. Is it in regards to this question?
Yeah, actually, it's not with regards to this question. It's more of a general question on the permitting. So I'll let Ryan maybe hit on this water rights one first from Keith.
Okay.
Yeah, between Rockies and Horse Ridge. The fact that there are two functioning exempt wells in the, on the existing mine sites, areas that would serve as future landfill, that's a good head start for a baseline water supply. They're in place, and could be used for baseline water demands during development and then in the initial years of the landfill. The additional tax lots that exist provide the opportunity for additional exempt well development. And then as far as securing water rights for that site, there are complications with some of the other rights held by one of the property owners, and timelines regarding timelines and process for certification and whatnot. So questions remain with that on what can be done with those, but there is a connection with potential water, with a water right permit associated with the Spencer Wells Pit LLC. Also, the location of Horse Ridge further down gradient in the basin is generally more favorable for water right transfers and moving downstream versus upstream or up gradient, down gradient. So generally, I think Horse Ridge is better suited, plus its proximity for hauling. So overall, the flat situation seems.
Yeah, it could be less haul distance, less, which would be less cost overall. So, okay. Thank you for the information on that. Appreciate it.
Dwight?
Yeah, so I was just gonna make a kind of a general comment around the schedule here and timing. Just having gone through facility siting and, in the past and kind of the experience with that, the fact that Dodds Road has the number of residential, owners around it and, road impacts and other things like that, that does make it more problematic. I mean, just from a local permitting standpoint and the like. So, raising that as a risk can spread that out. Even if it's feasible, it does spread out that timing. And the one other thing I would note with that site is that if there are height restrictions placed on it, that significantly impacts the volume at that site and really the value of that site to the county.
Thanks, Dwight.
Robin, did you raise your hand or did you not take it?
Yeah, no, I did. I just had a further thought on what Keith and Dwight just said. It seems like, if you use your term of practical flaw, that all but Horse Ridge have a practical flaw. Dodge Ridge, the Dodge side, Dwight just elaborated on it a little more. The Rot site, that ODF guideline, if you take that literally, would not allow us to go there as long as there was one other site. And Moon Pit, we can't seem to come to terms with the landowner. But I think at the same time, we shouldn't rush into Horse Ridge alone. We're repeating the mistake we made last time where we went with just one site and for negotiating purposes, we don't know how things are going to turn out. That we need to show some competition and etc. And that might help. It could even help us get Moon Pit back.
I was curious when you were talking about the on-site soil usage with Dodds Road, you mentioned that rock would have to be drilled, blasted, and crushed for soil cover. And you noted that blasting for this, making the cells would occur every 3 years. So how does that impact the amount of blasting? Is that something that would happen more frequently? And is that on site that you're generating that soil?
Yeah, it would be on site. Not necessarily that the blasting would occur more frequently, but there would be a lot of crushing that would be occurring on the site. But the blasting is usually pretty segmented. You want to find you can do larger blasts less frequently as opposed to continuous blasting.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then I had one other. So when we were just revisiting the Moon Pit site, I was just curious why the HQT, why the change was so substantial between 2023 and 2025. And I don't know if maybe this is a leading question, but I'm just wondering, like, are the activities that are already happening there just actually diminishing the habitat there? Or what was the main reason for that big difference between the two assessments?
Holden, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I guess from a magnitude scale, went from 4.6, it's now 4.6 and it was 9. So both from a magnitude scale, they are relatively low. ODFW said that the change was due to changes in habitat designations. And I think that is relating to what habitats they're quantifying as good sage grouse habitat versus what habitats they're quantifying as bad sage grouse habitats. And this is also to note that the analysis done in 2023 was done by another individual at ODFW, and then that position has since been filled by another individual. So there could also have been changes in the approach to the HQ2 itself that resulted in those changes.
Didn't low density also retract further away, which would have played into the HQT and the zones?
The 2023 HQT was utilizing those 2024 updated maps that are now in effect.
Right.
So it was just in those habitat designations that resulted in that shift of decreasing by 4.5 functional acres.
Thanks, Holden.
Yeah, John.
So just a couple of things. I think one of the questions that I would have is, understanding this is a very low confidence number, but if we said go at any one of these sites today, could you give us, and maybe you don't have the answer today, but I would like to see kind of when would we be able to see the kind of the first drop off? If we said, at this site, we're 3 years out, at this site, we're 4 years out, at this site, we just don't know because of mitigating circumstances. And then the other thing that I have is one of the comments that you made around the in lieu fee was that wasn't the most efficient way to do it. There are other mitigation steps that we could take.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my concern is we're putting a number kind of as a fee cost, acknowledging that is not an effective, not efficient way to view that. I mean, it does give us a benchmark, but we're looking at one site that's $7.6 million versus a couple of $100,000 for the others. If there are mitigation steps that we could take that would reduce those numbers, I would kind of like to get a better apples to apples comparison of what the actual cost would be to break ground at those sites. And then kind of what actual mitigation would look like as opposed to just in lieu of mitigation costs.
That's a great point. In the phase 2 site evaluation, in which we studied both Rockies and Moon Pit in great detail, you might find the sub-task report for the natural resource assessment interesting, where we go into detailed permitting responsible mitigation strategies, which even identify parcels of land to buy and specific mitigation activities to do. And we provided an estimated cost for both upfront mitigation and then the maintenance costs to keep up those habitat improvement activities. Colton, do you remember or have what those costs were by chance for Rothies?
I do not off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think we would need to bring that back for the next meeting.
Yeah.
I do think that.
Yeah, I didn't anticipate an answer to
Okay.
one of those questions today.
But yeah, there's more in.
I would add that I think those numbers are indicative a bit of also interested parties and potential litigation and resultant mitigation that come from those sorts of subsequent activities.
7.6 million, we could put up each pair of sage grouse in the area for a while. So,
Yeah.
that seems excessive.
Any other questions from members of the committee? We'll get into deliberations, but I want to open it up to public comment. At this point, we have a few people on the list. First is Kurt Sellers. Are you still here, Kurt? Yeah, here. If you want to. Yeah, we're asking people to hold it to 3 minutes.
I should be able to do that, although I have to say, some of what I'm going to say, you guys have actually made better arguments against Dodds Road than I'm going to make against Dodds Road here. So my name is Kurt Sellers. I live on a 10-acre property at the intersection of Dodds Road and Badlands Ranch. So certainly within the 2-mile radius of the Dodds site, probably within the 1-mile radius of the Dodds site, depending on how you measure it. So I'm here to encourage you to remove the Dodds site from the list of potential locations. There's many reasons. This is a port site choice. You guys have actually highlighted more I didn't even think about today. But my primary concern is one of water. As we all know, it's an extraordinarily precious resource, and the water demands of a landfill could easily overstress the already delicate situation out there. You outlined today that it's going to use 50,000 gallons a day in the summer and about 5,000 gallons in the winter. For context, that equates to the water usage of about 160 homes average usage. So both of these it calls for the water to be pulled from the canal when the canal is running, or well when the canal is not running. Both of those raise concerns because one, as a COID customer, the regulations state that we must not use, the water must be used for a land improvement. I would argue that a landfill is not land improvement. Second, the regulations also prohibit us from using our water from COID for dust abatement. I would love to use my water for dust abatement. It's windy out there, it's dusty out there. I would love to, but I'm not allowed to do that. So I don't know why. Maybe these comments would be better suited towards COID versus this committee, but allowing a landfill to use dust abatement when we're not allowed to would seem contradictory. But most concerning of all is the drinking water wells in the area. Some wells I know are already going dry. You stated some stats about well water depth there. I can tell you, I have a 750-foot deep well that I share with my neighbor. It produces 5 gallons a minute. That would take a 50,000 gallon truck 7 days to fill. So while the studies out there may show this, I can tell you the real world example, 5 gallons a minute at 750 feet. So the thought of pulling 50,000 gallons a day in an already stressed area, it's irresponsible at best, and it's an outright threat to our water security at worst. Wells start going dry. It's not just an inconvenience, it's a direct hit to the property values, livelihoods, and the long-term viability of this community. So instead of risking the water supply and community well-being in the Dodds site, I urge the group to prioritize exploring alternative locations that minimize the environmental impact and the water resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Thank you. Appreciate it. Mary Fleischman.
Hi, my name is Fred Fleischman. I'm the leader of the Central Eastern Oregon chapter of the Greater Broadsburg Wilderness. And one of the things that we really are concerned about is the Roth. 2 weeks ago at the county commission meeting, ODFW presented very much the same information that Chad just said. And some of the things that I found really interesting is the amount of movement that sage grouse will do. And they had cited an example of a hen taking her chicks 30 kilometers, which is 18 miles to get away from predators. Ravens are definitely a danger for sage grouse because they go after baby chicks, which is why they're on decline. And we all know ravens love landfills. So the other issue and concern is noise and traffic and how that affects not only the sage grouse, but also mule deer, pronghorn, all the rest of that. So really would like you to take Roth off the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Payer.
Bear with me, folks. I used to do sharing in 3rd grade, and here I am 7 years later doing it again. These are an example for the new people of the pile of rock out at Rothy's that was excavated, maybe 5 years ago. I have pictures. The previous people came out, but we have cobbles of this size, okay? and we have more dirt than you can shake a stick at. All the dirt is available. I did some math, and I think my math is correct. If you did 300-acre cells that were 30 feet deep in your cell development, not 30 feet, 90 feet. We know we can go 200 with no intrusions. There would be 43,560,000 cubic yards of this stuff. Okay? So here on the news the other day, they're saying, get rid of your bark dust, get rid of your bark chips up around your house because it's a fire danger. Well, we run our screening plant and we get millions of yards of this stuff. We donate it back to the city of Bend or Lapine or Redmond for wildfire mitigation. Tell me why that doesn't work, okay? Screening plant works good. Couple of comments, 3,500 acres for mitigation at a price significantly less than all these other places probably combined, or at least a couple of them. So you take that, what do you need? 400 acres for your first site. There's 250 years of landfill out there, folks. Okay. The dust control, and Ryan, this is more to you, used to be a chemical you could add to water and spray on county dirt roads and significantly reduce the water requirement and made the dust abatement last a lot longer. Maybe that's something we should look at. The multi-use factor of Roth East, they will try and help you folks retire that Forest Service permit. There's 18,000 additional acres of some of the most beautiful ponderosa pine forest in Central Oregon. Anybody that wants to come out there, you can get a hold of me and I will give you a personal feel. And I would offer that we need to, the sage grouse thing, I've got a water tank by my house. I live there. I let it overflow. I let water run down the hill. Sage grouse love water. They love mud. Do I have sage grouse? No. So my instinct tells me that the ODF and W numbers, if they're a modeling what? Okay? Sage grouse, this lady just said they'll move 18 miles. You can go from Roth East the side to the Bradovich well, where there's a pond and a water tank that Dave Roth keeps full so that sage grouse can come over to the corrals and have water. Thank you. Anybody that wants to paw through these bags, like I say, there's a lot of aggregate out there.
Thank you, Steve. Karen Kelly.
Freezing. But I'm awake. I'm Karen Kelly. You want the address, right? No, I'm at the intersection of Dodds and Obernolte. So I'm here for hoping to shut down the request for putting one on Dodds. I attended the COI meeting last Tuesday. Very political. And it was interesting because I actually called COI and spoken to them. And they said, on our canal, there absolutely are no water permits. You cannot get water rights from COI. The other canal going up north, you can. So I know of a lot of individuals that would love to have water rights. Is there something that you know that we don't know, that you can get something that we can't? They also, at the meeting, somebody brought up the fact that on the notes, when we started from last meeting, COI indicated initial preference for land lease agreement over a lump sum purchase, and no one there knew anything about that. I'd like to know how this project is gonna be funded for the landfill. Is this taxpayer funding? Is there a purse sitting over here somewhere that you get to draw from, or is it tax-based, or nobody seems to let us know when you finally come up with a number, how we'll pay for it. On your, oh, there he is in the upper right above Deschutes County Solid, the little Olympic flame that takes care of the gases. The Dodge site is surrounded by BLM land, which is all treed and a tinderbox. I'm concerned about fire hazard from that standpoint. When I spoke to BLM, they said, you know, you're a neighbor if you purchase that parcel. And if as such, nothing would impact them. However, that would. And that would impact us. We have a small volunteer fire department that serves us and are frequently drawn to the next county to fight fires. So water, fire, both are huge fears on our part. My well, and I can see the site from my front porch, my well is 850 feet. And I think they cited the average wells were at about 7. And I know just in collecting signatures, I've spoken with 7 different individuals whose wells have dried this year. And oddly enough, there's an interesting article. It's almost the entire magazine from last week's Source magazine regarding water and how when you take water from point A, it's a trickle down effect, and it's going to affect us all. I also, kind of on a side note, noticed that actually somebody told me to go look at it. There's a parcel of land adjacent to the existing landfill on Stevens Road in Ward. It's 263 acres. Now, I know nobody'd want that in the new Stevens tract next to their house, but there'd be no transportation problems there. I mean, I think you touch it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I also had an individual who couldn't make it, the Ritter family. They live on Alfalfa Market Road. She sent you a letter, but she asked if I could read it. Can I be 2 people?
We're at 4 minutes.
So no.
I'm sorry, we run out a lot of time for the SWAC to discuss and deliberate.
Okay, I'll have somebody else read it. Oops.
Sarah? What's your last name, Sarah?
Willisby. And I'm also for Caldwell. We have 3 properties out on Dodds Road. One adjacent right close to him, then I'm about a mile away. And just to point out, after listening to this, it's so frustrating that we're even an option. It's wild to me. It seems like these sage grouse are getting more care than human life. It's wild to me. I'm literally like so angry. It's frustrating that you go through that. And these sage grouse are priority over these human lives that are living. And we can get into a lot of things. I think the FAA needs to look into the backup airport that is within 2 miles of your site. It's on Cougar Road. There's also height restrictions within miles of that because it is the backup airport to the Bend Airport. So I think that needs to be acknowledged. It hasn't been at all. I think the, I keep going back to this ODF and the sage grouse is shocking to me. When we get into the fire value, the venting, the blasting, everything that's going to happen in there is shaking, blasting, fire, the birds, the rodents, along with this airport being right in this space, the backup airspace on Cougar. I mean, that really needs to be looked into. Julia that owns it was the Bend, the lawyer for Bend, and so she's not gotten huge sight on this yet, but I'm sure when she does, she'll have a lot to say and get involved into this. The blasting that you're saying happens every 3 years is honestly a bunch of crap. The land out there is solid rock. It is an absolute shelf of rock that any of us that live out there can tell you this will be nonstop blasting into the site. We have 18 to 36 inches of soil above the lava shelf. So your guys' soil out there there just won't be soil for you guys to do covering. The dust abatement, the same. This week, I've got my water on 15% to even water my turnouts because of this time of year, the heat seepage from COID. So we're barely able to even run where we're at. My well specifically, I can tell you is at 900 plus feet that I built 15 years ago. And I'm further down. Up the road, my daughter and her husband just bought 2 properties. In the address, well, it's right across from there. And their well is barely producing at this point, and it's over 800 feet, and it's barely producing a trickle in the sink. And it has a brand new pump, brand new everything in there. So they're gonna have to go back through and re-drill their well deeper to even get in there. And then that's not even to touch on, I could go on for so long. That's not even to touch on the forever chemicals. You guys know the methane, you know, everything that comes through. And as the venting and the blasting is shaking our homes, poisoning our cattle, poisoning our grounds, poisoning the aquifer. And as we get into the aquifer and we talk about permeable space and the rock and how the chemicals go into, and as you guys drill your wells for when the COID is not working, you're basically fracking the ground. That is going to have all of that seepage of all of these forever carcinogens going into our aquifer, which will now be poisoning all of our land, all of our agriculture, our hay, our animals that we're ingesting, that many are selling through town to your restaurants, so you guys will probably get poisoned too, along with the rest of us.
We're over 3 minutes. Thank you for your comment.
Yeah, thank you.
Laurel Coles.
Thank you. I'm here representing the East Cascades Bird Alliance, formerly the Audubon Society here in East Cascades. We're very concerned about one site in particular, and that is the Horse Ridge site. We've been working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service here on pinyon jays that are being considered for listing. They are being threatened in numerous states. In Central Oregon, it actually has the northernmost range of pinyon jays. We have found breeding colonies right there at the Horse Ridge site. And I think the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will make some determinations within a year about the status of this bird. The Horse Ridge site is unique because it is a natural site, unlike some of the other breeding sites that have been found in and around Bend and Sisters, where the birds are closer to urban areas. We value the natural habitat that the birds are using at the Horse Ridge site. We strongly discourage that you pick that site. In addition, of course, we are also in favor of discouraging sites that are near the greater sagegrass. Obviously, the Ross site is of concern. So I wanted to voice those recommendations from our organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Worst.
Thank you. It's probably debatable if I or my other 2 neighbors are the closest to the site. I was just trying to see if you guys can help me quantify if we're blasting and how much of a shock wave am I going to feel? Is it going to be measurable on a Richter scale? Should I get, this sounds goofy, I was like, gosh, my home was built by farmers 51 years ago. Do I need to get earthquake insurance because it wasn't designed for seismic activity, because it's not valid, it's not up to I guess current building standards? If you guys are out of topsoil and you're going to be grinding rock, since I'm less than a half a mile, the loudest thing out there is a hawk. What would the decibels be at my house? And I'm glad it would only be what, 8 hours a day, or what's a work day, 12? I don't know. How many decibels will I be hearing, and will it drown out everything I hear in my area? You guys are gonna be eventually flaring. How many lumens should I expect at my house in the night sky when it's cloudy in the wintertime? Is it going to be like the marijuana grow that you just see the entire sky is orange from their operations? I'm just trying to quantify how bad is it going to be? And if you guys, everybody's complaining about sites, if you guys just go, well, we're just gonna go ahead and do this Dodds Road site, do we get compensation? Are we like a sage grouse that gets compensation saying, hey, you're gonna have to put up with noise, light, and seismic activity along with truck activity? And do I get free trash service? Can I just wheel it across Dodds and will they pick it up? That's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Sue, is there anybody online with a raised hand?
We do have a comment in the chats that was made by Commissioner Patty Adair. I don't know if she wants to speak to that, or I can just read her comment.
I see it. Lake and Klamath County is going to do a joint landfill with us.
Oh.
I think I can say something. Yeah, I just wanted you all to be aware that I talked with Klamath County months ago, and then Lake County too. They are interested. It's fascinating seeing all the issues with the sites, and yes. So I'm just glad I was able to watch the meeting today, and thank you for allowing me to make those comments.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments? Yeah, I got one.
Hi, I just wanted to show my face again. I'm Allison White. I live at 25325 Dodge Road, and we have a parcel next door to 5311 Dodge Road, and I do believe we are the closest property directly across the street. So thank you, Steve. He kind of said more things that I was thinking. I mean, the water, we have 2 wells for the 2 properties. We grow hay. I'm trying not to get emotional right now. I didn't even plan on speaking, but I won't list the other things that I said last time about the safety issue on the actual road. I mean, the woman that was killed riding her bike. I mean, I can imagine with school buses, trucks, there's no, I can just envision a nightmare. And at this point, learning more about the blasting, walls going down. I feel at this point, you might as well just eminent domain. I mean, that's what it feels like. And compensation, yeah. Because the things that are gonna be happening with the noise and the dust and that kind of thing, we will have to shut down our business. Besides, well, if the water, well, that's CYD, but we grow hay, we are EFU zone, we have water rights. our business at the property is, my husband has clients that come, he does dog training, that would have to go if, these are highly skilled sheepdogs and it's not gonna work out, he has clinics and then we'll shut down that business for us. And then my business there, our property is the old Clarno Ranch. And so the Ray Clarno's little cottage was on there and it was just too cute not to share it with guests and people. And so it's recreation. I have people coming from Portland. I guide them about life in the Badlands. They hike right out. I have people that bring their horses to my property to ride the Badlands. Right out the back of our property is the Badlands. There is more recreation, I think, that's been brought up. There was just a new trailhead marked 2 miles north of us for the Tumalo Trailhead. So people do go down Dodge to recreate as well, and the planes. On the weekends, there's tons of little, the recreational little planes. I don't know what airport they're going to, but they're
Cougar
low
Road.
and they're flying over our house all the time,
It's
so.
the Cougar Road Airport.
What?
It's the Cougar Road Airport, the backup.
Is that
airport.
it?
No.
They're little and you can tell they're just having fun looking around. So there's just so many things that I'm really overwhelmed with this and I really urge you to take the Dawes Road property. Thank you.
I'm gonna have to stop public comment at this point. If people want to add more comment, you can email them to us at managethefuture@deschutes.org. We have to have some discussion before folks have to leave, so just wanted to follow up. So discussion of this group, or are there, is there anything that you want us to do? Do you want us to, move forward on any sites? Do you want us to, remove sites at this point? Is there other additional information that you would be requesting from us in order to be able to, make further, considerations? So I just want to open it up to the committee members to provide comments or thoughts.
I would second the request to get a little bit more information about the cost for mitigation on Roth, just because I agree, it's like that number is so large that it's sort of disqualifying of that site on a cost basis, but if it's true that there would be other options, that would be more likely. It would just be helpful to understand the relative cost of that potential site. And yeah, not like specific numbers, but even ballpark, like is it like 5 million or is it like 1 million? So that's the only additional information I think I need. I really appreciate, this is just, I'm impressed with like the additional information you guys can provide month over month. It's so helpful. At the last meeting, I've been in favor of kind of keep more sites for longer just because of what we went through last time with just suddenly it's so easy for all of them to drop away since there are so many, it's a challenging thing to find a site that has, limited issues. I feel much closer today to being willing to drop the Dodds Road site, which was discussed last time. Primarily just understanding some of those operational impacts that, the blasting, just the grinding and blasting we heard today, understanding that visually it would be a lot more prominent. And knowing that we still do have a couple other sites we would consider. So I'm curious what other SWAC members feel about that. I don't feel so strongly that I would necessarily need to push for that today, but at the last meeting, I didn't want to pull it off. This meeting, I feel more comfortable pulling it off. So I'm just curious what others feel about that.
I don't necessarily have an issue with that. I think for me, I am still very curious to see kind of what is, again, with low confidence, kind of what is the sticker price for each of these sites? Because I think that is a consideration. I mean, if we're looking at, we can look at Horse Ridge site, but it's going to be twice the cost of the Dodds Road site, but we have to kind of be able to weigh that out in order to make an educated decision. And then we also are gonna have to consider when would these be open? And kind of would we be incurring costs you know, and what would those factor in if we're not able to secure water rights on an open existing working site for 2 or 3 years? What additional costs are we gonna pay or incur? I don't know that I love pulling anything off today until we have those numbers, but I'm certainly open to being convinced.
Yeah, I would just say for us to really give you the sticker price, we probably have to go deep, which is what we did with Rockies, which we have in general terms, in pretty good terms, other than the full mitigation costs. We have it for Moon Pit. We have to go through the final site evaluation to really do the financial modeling.
Would you be able to rank them?
In terms of cost.
Most expensive to least expensive, like, you know, I mean, just using your experience and kind of gut.
Yeah, generally, I think the one thing we don't know yet is cost for the properties. You know, we're starting into the negotiations on those, particularly on the Horse Ridge sites. We don't even know if they are willing to offer it at this point. We'll know that next month.
Also, that decision may be made for us then.
Yeah. Quite possibly. Yeah. But I think to you know, we can rank them, but then also to know more generally on the Horse Ridge, we're gonna have to do the site assessment. Because there's gonna be road improvements and some other things we have to do there. Low mitigation, but potentially higher infrastructure.
Would generally estimate that it would be less than Moon Pit, which kind of prepared to move forward with Moon Pit, both Horse Ridge and Rockies. Could be comparable in terms of life cycle costs potentially, but in different ways. There's a longer haul cost to Rockies, and so there's a higher operational cost, but likely potentially a lower purchase cost. So there's a trade-off there. We have an appendix as part of the final site evaluation that digs deep into the costs associated with Rockies. And that can be done for Horse Ridge, even at the direction of the SWAC for this meeting.
Yeah, and I think if what you're asking for, we'll effort to bring that to the next meeting.
To answer your question, Cassie, what we put in appendix N, and you had this question as well, for the Rocky site, the estimated cost for natural resource mitigation for site development, using, you know, some of the more creative methods other than fee and lieu, was an initial cost of 1.5 million and 2.5 million of operations and maintenance over the life of the facility. So that brings down to roughly 4 million. So 50% off, kind of mitigate yourself.
Robin, you have a question? You're on mute.
I guess just to repeat my thought that I mentioned earlier, if we're discussing whether to drop a side, I would still hold on at least one more meeting. I know that politically, our meetings would be a lot easier if it wasn't for the local opposition and the Dodge site. And COID may make that decision for us anyway. And I'd hold on at least one more meeting till we had some more of these cost figures. And I would, you know, kind of do some parts of the final site evaluation for Horse Ridge to the extent possible that would help us, you know, see if there's any big red flags there.
I was gonna ask, can we do a site evaluation or site assessment to Horse Ridge, similar to maybe these?
If directed by you all, we can start into that while we wait on other sites, but it's an investment, and so it costs that we need to do a full assessment of Horse Ridge. It'll be probably $200 million, $250 million to bring back the full.
Okay, so maybe we're not there yet.
And months.
What's that?
In months time. Good work.
Yeah, I mean, just more.
Not an assessment, but an actual site visit.
Oh,
Like,
oh, sure. I see what you're saying. Yeah, we could schedule.
more information on, say, just more.
Yep. And if you all want to see that site, we can spend the time.
And I guess dots would obviously depend on CYD if they're even.
Yeah, I would wait.
Yeah.
And then, Tim, to answer to your comment to Commissioner Adair's comment, is there any negotiation with a multi-county jurisdictional landfill? I mean, is that at that point, is this kind of just conversational, or is there active interest that's been demonstrated by either of the counties?
We haven't heard directly from the county. We've reached out to staff in Klamath County and they said that was not an active process at this point. We are also considering that it would be a landfill sited out of the county. I think we would also kind of classify it as a long haul option. So we probably lump it with the gorge and have to do an assessment on cost relative to that versus those other options. Right now, we've been directed to look at an in-county option.
And was that the same one that we discussed a couple of years ago that they made like the, there was like a video about it or something?
It was a little different. That was a Lake County private development
So
that
that's
fell
not the same.
through.
Okay.
That developer has approached Klamath County.
Okay.
But there's it's to be determined if there's any legs to it or not.
Okay.
They have some real issues relative to their hydrology, and their groundwater is not very deep.
Okay.
So it may be very difficult, and there's some resistance from tribes, as we understand it. So, yeah, we would need more information to hear that it's a viable activity for them, for us to start to consider.
And that would be, I mean, we're talking years down the road, you're gonna run out of time.
Yeah, I
before
would say they're
anything
behind
close
us.
to it. Okay. That makes sense.
Any other, Robin, do you have another question? You're on mute again.
Oh, shoot, sorry. On that public comment about the Pinyon Jay, I guess I would follow up with the wildlife consultant or staff on that to see, you know, where is that jay located? Is it located right, you know, within the, I don't believe it would be within the existing pits, but maybe in some of the surrounding juniper, and how sensitive that bird is to disturbance. I don't, you know anything about Pinyon jays, but I would say find out a little bit about them. And where those nest sites are located to the extent, you know, that we can be told. I don't know if it's confidential.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have the same concerns, so just ditto to Robin and wanting to learn more about the Pinyon Jay.
Okay, any other questions or comments from? So there are an action here other than there's a bit of information, financial, environmental, costs and mitigations that we'll bring back to the next meeting. I want to bring to the timeline. Just to remind folks, is where we're at. We are looking at in this area here. If we do potentially next month, we're looking at decisions relative to supplemental. Or doing some final site evaluations for other sites potentially. If we step into that, that's probably going to be about what would you say, 6-month process to. So the committee would most likely be on hiatus, or we wouldn't be meeting monthly. We would have maybe a quarterly meeting to update you where we're at on the findings with final information to come back to you all towards the end of this year to make recommendations around moving forward. During that time, any sites that we are doing final site evaluations on, we would be negotiating with property owners to get more definitive agreements that could be actionable by our board. And with that, our next meeting is August 19th, 9 to 11. Oops. We will again provide any comments that we get from the public, we'll be providing to you all, as well as our board. And for anybody in the public, we have many ways to stay involved and connected. Come to our website. The Manage the Future website, there's quite a bit of information. There's a storyboard there that kind of tells you the whole kind of trail that and path that we've been on. And I do believe that at the next meeting, we'll have some more answers relative to the Dodd Road site and whether that warrants any further consideration. Okay. So with that, I want to thank everybody for attending. Thank you all SWAC members. Thank you public, and appreciate your comments. So that.
Watch that chair.
Yeah,